Hello everyone and good evening. You're all very welcome and we're delighted to have so many of you with us virtually today. Of course, we'd all love to be together on the DCU campus for an occasion like this, but it really is great that we can all come together in this virtual world. And just to note the diversity of the audience here this evening, we have hundreds of you here from all over the world, from different parts of Europe, from Africa, from the US and from further afield. So we want to just acknowledge that and thank you so much for being here and for engaging with this event. So we're here this evening for firstly the launch of DCU's new Centre for Religion, Human Values and International Relations. And the premise of this new centre is that a deeper engagement by public authorities with religious perspectives can act as a key tool and a key resource for global diplomacy. And this centre aims to become a European centre of excellence in the field of religion, diplomacy and peace. And as we're going to see today and hear from all of our speakers, this centre really is innovative and original in many ways. Most notably in terms of the multifaceted and multidimensional and inclusive approach that it takes towards developing an effective dialogue in this area that involves and includes all stakeholders and all voices. Philip McDonagh, former ambassador, has been appointed as the director of this new centre, and Philip, of course, brings a wealth of experience and knowledge and indeed passion to this role. So we're delighted that Philip is leading this new centre. We're also here today for the launch of a fantastic new book, which I'm delighted to have a copy of here, on the significance of religion for global diplomacy. And just to note that this book has very much taken shape alongside the development of this new centre. The book is original, it's forward-thinking, and it's groundbreaking in many ways, as we will hear from the various speakers who have been involved. I think one of the unique strengths of this book, like the centre, is that it also takes this multifaceted and inclusive approach towards engaging and developing a dialogue around the importance of religion for promoting global diplomacy. The book is also, I think, quite practical in identifying the various principles and values and application of those, and in terms of ultimately making some very relevant and practical recommendations. Another strength of this book and this centre, I think, not only does it reflect on historical perspectives and looking at history and looking at what we can learn from that, but there's an awareness of current and future perspectives and challenges. And I think today more than ever, we need to reflect on and respond to new societal and economic and other global challenges, such as climate change, challenges presented with developments in science and new technologies. And this centre really is positioning itself at the forefront of a conversation on these new challenges and opening up and reopening a very positive and inclusive dialogue on these matters. Both this centre and this book will support DCU's strategic plan around talent, discovery and transformation, as well as current and future research priorities of the university. And finally, I think it's also important to note that they reflect DCU's overarching mission to transform lives and societies. And that is what I think is the key message, ambition, and wider significance of this book and this new centre. It aims to transform lives and societies through active global and community engagement and developing and focusing on this really inclusive and positive dialogue that hears and listens to all voices. So I'd like to congratulate Philip McDonagh and his colleagues and his co-authors on this great achievement and on all of the work and collaboration that has gone into this book and this new centre. We have a great evening planned for you and lots of fantastic guests and great discussion to come. I would also like to invite the audience, if you do have any comments or any feedback for the panelists in respect of the book or this new centre, please do feel free to share it via the chat function on Zoom. I'm sure everyone is well acquainted with Zoom and the chat there. So we do want to acknowledge the varying perspectives and views and the variety of people here. So don't be shy and do feel free to share any comments that you might have. Firstly, I'd like to hand you over to our first speaker, Professor Daire Keogh, President of DCU. And through his leadership and his initiative, he recognises the importance of all people and the importance of respect for diversity and difference in society. And his vision of DCU is of a university at the service of society, and one that makes an impact on the society around us. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Professor Daire Keogh, President of DCU. Thank you.
Aisling, thank you very much for that warm welcome. And the Professor de Puer has rightly explained the significance of this initiative. And I'm glad that as a professor in the School of Law and Government that she has done so with such great enthusiasm, which displays really the interdisciplinarity of the centre and of the embrace from colleagues across the university. I'm delighted to welcome everybody this afternoon to the inauguration of DCU Centre for Religion, Human Values and International Affairs. I'm particularly pleased to launch this important volume on the significance of religion for world diplomacy. In particular, I'd like to welcome Taoiseach Micheál Martin, who is visiting Dublin City University for his first time as head of government of Taoiseach. And I'd like to thank him again for his support of this new initiative and his continued support of our university. I'd also like to extend a really warm welcome to representatives attending today from civic society and a wide spectrum of world religions, including the Christian denominations and representatives of the Muslim, Baha'i, Sikh, Jewish and Hindu communities here. I'd particularly like to acknowledge the presence of Archbishop John McDowell, Archbishop Michael Jackson, Archbishop Dermot Farrell, and his predecessor, Archbishop Dermot Martin. Welcome also to members of the Diplomatic Corps who are joining us today, and especially those diplomats not merely accredited to Ireland, but to other states. I'm very pleased to see in the room, as I look at the participant list, political leaders from both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And I'd especially like to call out and welcome former President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, in whose honour, of course, we have a Women in Leadership lecture series here at the university. I'd also like to thank our visiting speakers, Nicola Brady, who, as you know, was General Secretary of the Irish Council of Churches, and Kishan Manocha, who's Head of Tolerance and Non-Discrimination at the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights. It's great to see colleagues from all 5 faculties here. I'm especially pleased to see students in the room. The students are our purpose, of course, and I was delighted to see that one lady registered herself and under occupation entered old age pensioner. As Ireland's first age-friendly university, I'm pleased that she feels welcome here. This new centre, the Centre for Religion, Human Values and International Affairs, is a very welcome addition to the scope of DCU's global engagement. Here in this city, in this great city of ours in Dublin, in the 19th century, an Englishman, John Henry Newman, delivered a famous series of lectures on the idea of a university. And in that series, Newman emphasized the importance of embracing all fields of learning and the creation of a pluralist community of learning, which is the essence of a university. At DCU, we embrace those ideas. And in fact, in 2016, we made history and broke new ground when we successfully merged with 3 denominational colleges in the city. 3 colleges with very strong identities and long and distinguished traditions, many of them going back over 200 years to the service of their communities, not merely in Dublin, but throughout the 32 counties of Ireland. Those colleges, the Church of Ireland College of Education, the Mater Dei Institute, and St. Patrick's College, Drumcondra, were incorporated to create what we called at the time a new DCU. DCU, of course, is a public university. It's a public institution. It's a secular institution by definition, but we are a consciously pluralist institution that allows spaces for those of all religions and none. And in terms of that incorporation, I'm very pleased that 2 of the pioneers of the project, Archbishops Michael Jackson and Diarmuid Martin are with us today. This new centre at DCU draws on the expertise of staff in several areas, not merely theology, but in disciplines such as history, philosophy, law, government, literature, education, healthcare, and the exploration of human identity within the natural sciences. We are very proud too that at DCU we host the Institute for International Conflict Resolution, an institute which was launched by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in 2012, and an institute which we believe will work very closely with this new body. DCU is a place-based university. We are in Dublin, we are in North Dublin, but we are a network and part of a network of global connections. We aspire to be Ireland's University of Impact, and we measure our success against the metric of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. By exploring international relations from a values-based perspective and investigating new models for achieving peace and global cooperation, this new centre is clearly aligned with DCU's mission, as Aisling said, to transform lives and societies. At a time when nationalism and poisonous xenophobia are increasingly negative factors in global politics, our new centre brings vision and values to the sphere of diplomacy. Universities like DCU have a critical role to play in that process, not merely a role, but I would say an obligation to facilitate new frameworks for dialogue that refocus diplomacy and international relations to create common ground. As the volume on the significance of religion for world diplomacy argues, there is a need and an urgency to develop a shared human values, a common humanism, as the volume describes it. On this island, religious leaders and communities played a key role in encouraging and supporting the dialogue that led to the common ground and shared values of the Good Friday Agreement. I am delighted that our new centre is already working with values-based and values-related projects with the Irish Council of Churches, the Irish Interchurch Meetings, and the representatives of other religions on the island. Such projects have enormous potential to deliver huge benefits for our communities. In conclusion, I'd especially like to thank the great mover of this project, its founding director, Professor Philip McDonagh, and his colleagues for their hard work in establishing the centre, and I wish the centre every success. I'd especially like to invite people engaged in this discussion today to remain engaged and to remain connected and to contribute to the development of the centre and the delivery of its important mission. I'd like to congratulate the editors of the volume 2. So thank you to everybody who organised today's event. And finally, to our speakers, Kishan and Nicola, welcome to DCU and thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Taoiseach Micheál Martin.
Daire Keogh, agus Vorina Specialta, agus Gwynúsla Galer, Bonamar Dusbar, Movikus, Gwaldi of Sutton Curve, Veliv, Tranona, Hanan Unut Shop, Nua Aquafilan Chol, agus an Lord Tochta, at all Luchagut, Marine, the Shin. I'm delighted to be able to launch this important new centre at Dublin City University, as well as this important publication on the significance of religion for global diplomacy. John Henry Newman delivered his seminal lectures on the idea of a university here in Dublin. And Newman stated, and I quote, "If then a practical end must be assigned to a university course, I say it is that of training good members of society." Today, that training depends on acknowledging the pluralist character of our society and the importance of all fields of learning. It depends also on recognizing the interrelatedness of societies across the world. Vision and values are essential. In that spirit, I want to welcome the establishment of the Centre for Religion, Human Values and International Relations as an important new location for the study of critical issues. We know that real vision and real values lie behind the United Nations, the European Union, or peace process, or aid policy, or peacekeeping missions. Under the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, we are committed to leaving no one behind. The challenge is to interpret and apply our high-level values in a world that is changing rapidly and faces many existential questions in the realm of climate change and technological developments. The establishment of the Centre is timely as we reflect upon the interaction between religion and human values on the one hand, and diplomacy and peace building on the other. Not just on the island of Ireland, but as we face these issues on the wider international stage as an elected member of the UN Security Council for 2021-2022. The new centre underlines DCU's reputation as a centre of excellence in theology and religious education. It also highlights the relevance of the work of DCU to public policy making and the importance of academic support for the dialogue between religious communities, political leaders, and public authorities. There is important work to be done on the concepts and organisational principles that can encourage a mutually beneficial engagement by political leaders and other stakeholders with religious actors. This centre brings together academics, thinkers, and practitioners in the field of religion and diplomacy in a collaborative setting. It draws from the best traditions of thought about the nature of religion and human values, and highlights how diplomats must engage with these ideas and concepts. I am confident that the Centre will make a valuable contribution to how policymakers address these challenges, not only in Ireland, but further afield in Europe and in the wider international community. Often religion is seen as a source of conflict, but we know from our own experience that religious leaders and people of faith can make an enormous contribution to promoting peace and reconciliation. The Centre reflects that profound insight. It gives practical expression to the complex but rewarding work of learning from the wider global experience, and will help us to shape a series of practical tools that promote human values and sustain peace. As well as that global perspective, the new Centre reflects DCU's deep commitment and engagement with cross-border dialogue on the island of Ireland. Our Shared Island initiative is putting a strong focus on inclusive dialogue involving all communities and traditions about our shared future on the island. We must all renew our commitment to building that truly shared future envisioned by and in the Good Friday Agreement. And now is the time to redouble our efforts to build connections and trust between traditions on our island. If we do more together in the everyday areas of life, we can make practical progress on reconciliation. This is the core of government's approach to a shared island. By working together, north and south, we can overcome the challenges that we face together. It involves developing our shared island economy, deepening our cooperation in areas such as health and education, and investing together for the benefit of the Northwest and border regions. It involves fostering constructive and inclusive dialogue and supporting a program of research so that we have access to the best of ideas grounded in the strongest of evidence. All sections of society, north and south, nationalists, unionists, or neither, can engage with this fully and confidently, because no outcome is preordained under the Good Friday Agreement, only that we should seek a reconciled and shared future. I note that the Centre is already involved in promising values-related projects with the Irish Council of Churches, the Irish Interchurch Meeting, and the representatives of other religions. Both in this jurisdiction and in Northern Ireland, we need to invest intelligently in community and the common good. St. Patrick, St. Columcille, and St. Columban would expect no less. As I've said, nurturing a deeper appreciation of how questions of faith, peace building, and reconciliation interact is a global challenge. We must always be respectful of the diversity of beliefs when promoting reconciliation and dialogue. With that in mind, it is also a pleasure to launch a new book on this important subject this evening. I want to commend the writers of On the Significance of Religion for Global Diplomacy for a wide-ranging, thoughtful and rigorous analysis of the linkages between religion and diplomacy. Diplomats and policymakers are increasingly recognizing the importance of integrating an understanding of the wider religious context into their work, particularly those that work in international bodies like the EU, UN, and in other multilateral organizations. The co-authors, who include Kishan Manocha and Vasquez Mendoza, and former Irish ambassadors Philip McDonagh and John Neary, take an exciting and original approach to thinking about the connections between religion and diplomacy. The authors identified the challenges we face internationally, including the fracturing of global consensus, the long-term effects of COVID-19, climate change, and ongoing tensions between and within states. In response, they argue for a new dialogue with religion, facilitated by international organizations as a distinct contribution to building long-term peace. In a time of trial, we cannot afford to dismiss from consideration any person's conscience, religion, worldview, or life stance. Only the culture of encounter, one of Pope Francis's favorite phrases, founded on the humility to listen, can restore the resonance in politics of great and fundamental words: mercy, discernment, justice, trust, and hope. Ireland is now at the forefront of addressing these challenges at the top table of international diplomacy as an elected member of the UN Security Council. The authors are not daunted by those challenges, but bring a message of hope. They believe that there is much we can learn from the world's religious traditions. They offer practical solutions to help us in that task, particularly through enhancing the effectiveness of multilateral organizations such as the UN, the EU, and the OSCE. We know on the island of Ireland how building peace not only requires the deep engagement of civil society as well as religious leaders, but that political leaders and policymakers must be prepared to engage in that process with a long-term vision and in a committed and determined fashion. This book is an original, insightful, and optimistic contribution to the process of building and sustaining peace in the 21st century, and will help us think about how to advance that goal on our shared island as well as globally. Thank you again for the opportunity to open the centre and to launch this important new book. I wish you every success in your future work.
Many thanks to the Taoiseach for taking the time to be with us today and for supporting this very important and timely new centre and new publication. The Taoiseach underlined the importance of academic support for the dialogue between religious communities, political leaders and public authorities, and we do appreciate that recognition and that acknowledgement. So many thanks for that. And thanks of course to our President, Professor Daire Keogh, for his very inspiring words, and of course for his emphasis on the importance of global engagement, the impact for DCU and of the society around us in supporting this new centre and this new publication. So now I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Archbishop John McDowell, the Archbishop of Armagh, Primate of All Ireland and Metropolitan. We're delighted that you're with us today and that you are a part of this important conversation. And thank you so much for your willingness to engage and to be involved. We're very much looking forward to your contribution today, and over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Taoiseach, and thank you particularly to Philip McDonagh for the opportunity to be present at the official launch of the centre, and of course for the privilege of responding to the Taoiseach's remarks. I haven't had advance notice of what the Taoiseach would say, so I hope what I've prepared, will hopefully find some points of contact with what he said and also with what Professor Keogh said. But first, though, it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the hospitality that given by DCU to the Church of Ireland Centre of Education on the All Hallows campus, which was mentioned by the President in his introductory remarks. The centre provides training for national school teachers in the Reformed traditions, and also training for all traditions in certain aspects of special educational needs teaching. And it has very happily settled in to DCU, a secular university. And I chose the word hospitality carefully in the light of what I want to say in a minute or two. There are lots of other people here, particularly the co-authors of the book being launched today, who have far better credentials than I have to speak about religion in its international and diplomatic roles. And indeed, Nicola Brady from the Irish Interchurch Meeting will be able to say something about the work that she has been involved in the unfolding work of the centre. So I hope you'll let me say just something in broader terms about church politics and society on this island. First, I would say that one of the church's aims now should be to equip our members, but particularly our official spokespeople, whether they're lay or clerical, to be able to contribute to the public realm in pluralist democracies, a pluralist democracy like Ireland. It has taken the church, or most of us, a very long time to acknowledge the virtues of pluralism. And even when we have recognized it in our heads, we haven't quite embraced it in our hearts. And our mindset for far too long was that old Augustinian adage, error has no rights. But I hope we now recognize that, at least as far as the island of Ireland is concerned, we, the churches, will never have, and nor should we ever have sought to have, the first word or the last word on any matter. But I do think that we still have a word which can be spoken in solidarity with others, the solidarity of social friendship. I'm afraid the preacher in me will inevitably now stretch for a metaphor. So to put it another way, we need to give up the idea, and I heard this discussed at an interfaith seminar, we need to give up the idea that we, the churches, must always be the host. And we must learn to become visitors again, observing the courtesies that visitors should observe. And perhaps now there are no hosts at the table of public discourse, or perhaps we just temporary ones depending on the occasion. And instead we come together in the solidarity of social friendship. Friendship tends to be a forgotten kind of virtue and relationship in the Christian tradition and in other traditions. Often it's overwhelmed by the more intense claims of love and sacrifice. But the solidarity of friendship is a much, much stronger and more active social virtue than tolerance. Other people's tolerance of me will allow me to make a fool of myself and will keep me at a distance. But friends never would. Tolerance is happy to carry on in parallel lines. But like Euclid, friendship recognizes that parallel lines cannot enclose a space. Tolerance cannot enclose a space of social solidarity. But friendship has the room and the wisdom to know that there isn't even always an imperative to agree. In order to participate constructively in the public realm, we, the churches, will need to relearn what has sometimes been called epistemological humility. That means both seriously engaging with other disciplines to learn the criteria they use to arrive at truth, and also not pushing our own claims beyond the point of credibility. But it also acknowledges the unity of all truth. However, a healthily plural world that is to be sustainable needs depth. It needs to involve not just individuals, but also institutions, because institutions are the way we stay together over time and the way we pass wisdom, and of course also sometimes pass bad habits to other generations. This depth also requires long-term engagement between individuals and the institutions who are the carriers of deep meaning in Ireland. And in that sense, the solidarity of friendship requires patience and commitment. Or to borrow a word from the Hebrew scriptures, it requires a covenant, not a procedure or a protocol. A covenant between social friends. And because it is based on the limited but rich values of friendship rather than competitiveness, it may just open a space between the market and the state, both of which can easily develop imperial ambitions in the field of values. And in so doing, it may bring the most vulnerable into the center of the piece in terms of policy and public expenditure, and may also discover, in a phrase of another Irish philosopher, that there can be many impoverished providers in society. I hope it's not going too far to say also that such social friendship between all who have a contribution to make to the common good will need to set aside the idea, which seems now to be almost a given in much public discourse, that religion was the past and it has nothing to contribute to the future. And of course, this is what the centre is there to deepen and to develop. At the worst, that sort of idea is terribly demoralising, because it effectively writes off what is of ultimate value to a huge number of citizens. And even in some of its more benign forms, it's an impoverishment. I'm going to finish by mentioning the name and the work of one of the most accomplished contemporary theologians of politics and church and society who has recently retired. He happens to be an Anglican, but his name is Oliver O'Donovan, and his father was the Irish writer and man of letters Frank O'Connor, who wrote under a pseudonym. And I suppose most people in this, at least from Ireland in this part of the webinar, will have read Frank O'Connor's best known short story, Guests of the Nation. And even a dull northern literalist like me can see the heavy irony in that title. But now we are all guests of the nation and guests of one another, to be treated not with formal politeness before the ultimate put down by the host, but with the open-handed hospitality we can still learn, we religions of the book, particularly from the ancient religions of the East. It will mean being prepared to move away from a moral monoculture, whosever monoculture that might be, and towards a true pluralism that isn't enslaved to one universally acclaimed good, that of individual self-determination, but towards the realization of this idea of social friendship and the common good. And I wish Philip and the Centre all the best for the future in developing those complex ideas in a complex and difficult and dangerous world. Thank you.
And many thanks, Archbishop McDowell, for being with us today and for that fantastic contribution. And again, for your willingness to engage in this conversation. The Archbishop has written recently that religion should have a voice in society, not the first word, not the last word, but a voice. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something we should certainly take note of and take away from today. He's also emphasised the importance of developing the common good in a pluralist society as a common goal we can all work towards. And again, that is, I think, a theme of today, and certainly something that we can take away from. And also something that struck me from that was the emphasis on the solidarity of friendship. And I think that is particularly relevant in today's world, and the universally the challenges that we all share. And I think that is a very positive way of approaching it. So I'd like to introduce you now to our next speaker, Dr. Kishan Manocha, who is also a co-author of this fantastic new book and is head of the Tolerance and Non-Discrimination Department of the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights in Warsaw, Poland. And Kishan, it's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and good evening from Warsaw, and Taoiseach and Archbishop McDowell, Excellencies, Your Graces, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and colleagues, it's a pleasure, an honour and a privilege to be associated with this launch event with the Centre. and of course with the book on the significance of religion for global diplomacy, and to have been invited to say some words at this official launch event. I also did not have foresight of Taoiseach and the Archbishop's inspiring and very wise presentations. So I hope what follows will build on those very important words, which I fully endorse. When I joined the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, or the OSCE, and began to work with colleagues from other international and regional organizations, such as the United Nations, the Council for Europe, and the European Union, and with governments across the OSCE region on our common human rights, development, peace building, democratic governance, and security agendas, I was immediately struck at the prominence of religion in international public discourse and on the international stage, and by the systematic efforts being made to engage in new ways and in exciting ways with religious leaders, actors, and ideas as collaborators and responsible partners in international and domestic settings. I also noted an emerging consensus among domestic and international policymakers that the increasing social, political, economic, and cultural challenges facing societies and nations across the world, as well as issues of broader societal well-being, cannot be overcome without honestly engaging the insights that exist within religion, or should I say, religions. Indeed, there would seem to be a growing recognition that religion has a unique unifying power and can be a force for peace and for understanding, as we've already heard, and has something to offer that traditional politics does not and cannot offer. In the international arena, global faith communities take part in diplomatic work on issues such as nuclear disarmament, the environment, combating human trafficking, and the global refugee crisis. And countless religious actors, whether they be religious leaders or individuals, organizations, communities, faith-based or faith-inspired organizations, in all parts of the world are motivated by their faith to engage in efforts to eradicate poverty, tackle homelessness, advance human rights, provide humanitarian aid, run schools and hospitals, or establish community-based media. The latter are just some of the myriad examples of religion's powerful social capital at work within and across countries. And religion's growing significance on the domestic and international scenes has been reinforced during this past year by the notable, definitive contributions that religious communities and actors have made in diverse settings across the world, including in Europe, in response to the disruptions caused by the current global health crisis. And I should say, doing so despite the unprecedented restrictions on freedom of religion or belief imposed in countless countries as a response to COVID-19. When reflecting with colleagues on religion's contribution to public and political discourse, I was reminded of the less well-considered potential of religion to contribute to the imaginative renewal of the public sphere. Far from being anachronistic myths for a non-scientific age, it is argued that religious narratives are a powerful resource in addressing the problems we face today, and indeed they are. A good example of the potential of religion as social imaginary is how the papal encyclical Laudato Si is feeding into current public discussion about climate change. A flagging discourse about environmental responsibility is being resourced by a bold religious vision of the world as a created gift for which humanity has responsibilities as steward. Or consider how the language supplied by the Baha'i international community to describe the interdependent relationship between individuals, communities, and institutions in a society is informing and helping to shape the ongoing global discourse on sustainable development and social progress. Nevertheless, the idea that religion, or the thought of giving religious ideas a more prominent role in the realm of policy making, worries many people. As significant as religion may be, the public role of religion remains highly contested, with little consensus about its role in society and whether that role is positive or negative. Now, time does not permit a thorough discussion in this regard, but suffice it to say, it is widely acknowledged that there are potentially problematic aspects to the role of religion in the public sphere. Religion is perceived by many, certainly by some, as a narrow marker of identity, an exclusionary force that creates divisions and violence and serves as an obstacle to integration, whether of people or ideas. Other reservations about admitting religious voices into the public sphere, especially formal, political, and policy-making spaces, arise when religious values are perceived as clashing with international human rights norms. For example, the use of religious traditions in support of the death penalty, or an undermining sexual or reproductive rights. A seemingly intractable rise of sectarian violence, religious fundamentalism, radicalization, and terrorism have understandably left many disenchanted with religion and wary of its place in society. Notwithstanding the complexities and controversies involved, I feel we must not shy away from addressing these issues honestly and with humility, and including where necessary with religious leaders and communities themselves. For if religion is to become an increasingly positive force of social progress, as the book argues, and as current evidence and experience would suggest, then social institutions, including public authorities, including multilateral intergovernmental organizations, will need to reshape their relationship with religion and let go of the many harmful assumptions that leave little room or no room for religion to play a part in the public sphere. In this connection, restrictive concepts of secularism still prevail in a number of countries, including in Europe, and limit the opportunities and possibilities of religious actors as credible and serious voices and participants in public activities and public discourse. Implicit in the book is the call for a new post-secular sensitivity, beyond the common fearful and defensive response, and towards a consideration of the new opportunities for social capital and social imagination that the new prominence of religion in the public sphere might present in addressing the manifold and pressing challenges of our time, including in the working of multilateral organizations such as the UN, the EU, or the OSCE. In doing so, the book echoes and builds on similar arguments put forward by a number of distinguished commentators in recent years. For example, Jürgen Habermas, the German philosopher and sociologist, who, after a lifetime of advancing the most rational and eloquent of arguments for secular liberalism, has concluded that politics stripped of faith is quite unable to inspire people to bridge the gap between the world we have and the world we can build. And in his landmark book, The Secular Age, Charles Taylor, the Canadian political philosopher, reaches equally forward-looking conclusions, stating that, and I quote, "The sphere of public and political negotiation flourishes only in the context of larger commitments and visions, and that if this is forgotten or repressed by a supposedly neutral ideology of the public sphere, immense damage is done to the moral energy of a liberal society." The challenge is how we build and maintain open, constructive, and trusting dialogue and collaboration between religious individuals, leaders and communities, and policymakers at all levels, including public authorities. This is important because cooperation between policymakers and religious actors has been historically sensitive, with misperceptions and suspicions on both sides, having created tension and alienation. Too often, public servants are reluctant to partner with faith groups. This reluctance can arise from ignorance about religion and about the contribution religious individuals, communities, and organizations can make, what we might call faith illiteracy. But too often, it arises from faith phobia, an active objection to the principle of religious actors working in partnership with public authorities and institutions of governance. The experience of secular and religious actors working together in pursuit of the common good in a diverse range of settings across the world, including in the international diplomatic and policy-making space, is yielding valuable insights into the role of religion in addressing important dimensions of modern public policy challenges. Drawing on this body of extensive experience, the book proposes a framework of engagement that can best harness the power of religion to help humanity tackle its most challenging problems. It is a framework the authors hope will not only facilitate the effective engagement of religious actors, but also ensure that they act responsibly and with integrity in the public sphere and serve as reliable partners for secular actors such as public authorities. This, the authors hope, will go a long way to addressing some of the concerns raised by those who want to keep religions out of the public sphere or at arm's length. And I would like to specifically highlight 3 of the principles or so-called rules of engagement that the book presents. One is that dialogue and cooperation between religious actors and non-religious actors should strive to safeguard the uniqueness of their respective standpoints, their separate spheres of influence, and the different responsibilities and missions that they take forward. Often unconsciously, policymakers try to change the attitudes of religious actors, attempting to assimilate them to the more secular policy discourse. Vice versa, religious actors sometimes expect that policymakers will change their attitude towards religion and accept the language of or discourse of moral or religious values. 2, and notwithstanding the importance of the aforementioned, there is also the need to seek common ground while respecting difference. Religious and secular actors have enough things in common which make cooperation possible. Indeed, the level of agreement on most issues obliges them to seek ways to cooperate. The peaceful search for solutions to the issues facing society is best facilitated by a process of public deliberation where decisions are made by reference not to sectional interests at stake, but to universal principles. Deliberation and democratic contestation of arguments does not require each actor to abandon his or her values, only that they be prepared to subject them to scrutiny, rigorous analysis, and to debate not just conclusions, but assumptions. The free, independent, collective investigation of reality and search after truth demands nothing less. And 3, when public authorities come to think about effective engagement with religion in any setting, it is important that they understand how the concept of lived religion operates in that context. The religious sector is broad, deep, and complex. And often those religious actors with real influence, capacity, and experience of working for the betterment of society are not publicly visible figures holding formal titles. Many of these individuals are women and youth who are frequently left out of formal state religion and interfaith dialogue initiatives and projects. And related to this, it is also important that the renewed attention attributed to religion as a factor of policy making does not focus mainly on those religions that can make a difference, that are politically influential or numerically strong, because this can lead to an implicit dichotomy between politically relevant, so-called, and irrelevant religions, with the danger that those belonging to the less relevant group remain largely ignored and lose out on opportunities to contribute their valuable share to the discourse on the future of our societies. And this would not be in line with the obligations of states and public authorities under international human rights law that require them to create the conditions for all religious belief and belief communities under their jurisdictions to contribute to the betterment of society on an equal footing. The Centre assumes its important mission at a portentous moment as we build towards recovery following the pandemic. It is evident that major aspirations are unfolding across conversations and public discourses around the world, speaking of a deep-seated yearning for a profound shift in the functioning of society, creating a future for all people, where no one is left behind, as Taoiseach reminded us. Leaders, including religious leaders, prominent thinkers and commentators, have begun to explore fundamental concepts and bold aspirations that in recent times have been largely absent from public discourse. Concepts such as human solidarity, unity, oneness, equity and justice are moving from the margins to the center of social discourse. As religions have long been the source of new understandings of the qualities that define good, just, and unified society, as well as providing the motivation to realize them in the life of humanity. Their role in the discourses opening up would seem not only most timely, but also most essential. By creating and supporting spaces for dialogue and engagement between secular and religious actors, the Centre will help these important discourses advance and encourage new ones. No doubt, it will also inspire and facilitate a robust conversation about the relationship between religion, politics, and society in general. As it pursues these and other areas of work, I wish it every success under the wise and visionary leadership of my good friend and esteemed colleague, Philip McDonagh. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Kishan, for that very thoughtful and comprehensive contribution, and congratulations, of course, on your great contribution to this book and the wealth of experience and knowledge, of course, that you bring to this conversation, particularly around human rights and issues of equality and non-discrimination. And I think this conversation really benefits from an awareness of and application of these various principles. I just want to say hello again to the audience, and I hope you're all enjoying the conversation, the really interesting conversation today. I think it's very inspiring to hear the diversity of voices in this conversation, and then the focus on the common goals and the common good. Just a reminder to the audience, if you do have any comments or any feedback that you would like to share, we'd be delighted to hear from you. So just a reminder that you can pop it into the chat function there on Zoom, and we'll try to get to it. I also think it's important, just on listening to the panelists this evening, to note that this centre will undertake interdisciplinary research on the concepts, values and principles that can encourage a mutually beneficial engagement by policymakers with stakeholders and other stakeholders with religious actors. Both in this jurisdiction and in Northern Ireland and indeed elsewhere, we need to invest intelligently in community and in the common good. And we're very proud that this centre is making such an active and a positive contribution to those goals. So now we're coming towards the end of the evening, and I'd like to hand you over now to our final speakers for the evening, Philip McDonagh and Nicola Brady. Philip, of course, is former ambassador, adjunct professor, and the director of the new Centre for Religion, Human Values and International Relations. And of course, he's co-author of this fantastic new book. And joining Philip is Nicola Brady from the Irish Interchurch meeting. And thank you, Nicola, for being so engaged in this discussion and so willing to be involved. We're delighted that you're here with us this evening, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the contribution from you both. So over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Aisling. Taoiseach, President, distinguished guests. I'm very grateful to the organisers and especially to Philip for the opportunity to bring a message of encouragement and appreciation from the Irish Council of Churches and the Irish Interchurch Meeting as you launch this centre and publication, and to say a few words about the value of this work from our perspective. The Irish Interchurch Meeting brings together Christian leaders from across the island of Ireland for relationship building, dialogue, and collaboration on issues of shared concern. And we greatly value the opportunity to partner with this centre on research projects that we hope will support the leadership of faith communities on social justice issues, both national and international. In our work in recent years, we've seen renewed academic interest across a range of disciplines in the area of religion and belief, recognising the significance of religious faith in people's lives, including how it shapes their sense of identity and their sense of community. Academics have been exploring how best to support policymakers in the promotion of religious literacy and in the development of frameworks that facilitate the inclusion of religious leaders in civic engagement on matters of social policy. And we've heard a lot about that from previous speakers. These questions have also been a particular area of focus for us in the Irish Interchurch Meeting, where our member churches have been exploring together how best to bring a collective Christian witness to a pluralist and multicultural society. It is our hope through this work to model unity in diversity and a shared concern for the common good to a society that is grappling with many different threats to social cohesion. We've been encouraged by political and civic responses to efforts by church leaders to create spaces in which we can discuss issues like peace and reconciliation, racial justice, and social inclusion. But we're conscious that there's much more work still to do. The research partnerships we're engaged in through this centre reflect the full range of the Church's engagement, from their roots in local communities to their international networks. The Economics of Belonging project seeks to build on the pastoral and charitable engagement of faith communities with the socio-economic barriers to belonging, developing their capacity for advocacy to help shape policy in this area, in partnership with academics and the wider community and voluntary sector. This work will have a particular emphasis on international best practice in terms of well-being indicators, recognising that one of the greatest barriers to belonging is the feeling that you have no stake in society or hope for the future. Our second project on multilateralism and methodology asks what it means to be a global community in the context of the major challenges that face the whole of humanity at present: COVID-19, climate breakdown, war, displacement of people, and many more, and the pressures on our multilateral systems as they seek to respond. Building on the analysis in the book we launched today on the significance of religion for world diplomacy, we are asking questions about what religious actors can bring to the table in this context, and seeking to identify the factors that may be limiting their contributions. We've been able to use Zoom to best effect during this time to connect us with experts from around the world to ensure we bring that sense of global community to our own analysis. In both these projects, the scale of the challenges is daunting, but this is hope-filled work. It is helping us to think creatively about the leadership potential of faith communities in the work of social justice, and to develop the evidence base and structures that support that engagement. So we are very grateful for the opportunity and look forward to deepening these connections. And with that, I hand over to Philip.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm so grateful to everyone who's taken part this evening, the Taoiseach, Archbishop McDowell, Kishan, Nicola, and of course our President in DCU, Daire, and all the friends at DCU who have made this event possible. Our centre intends to make a distinctive contribution in the sphere of religion, diplomacy, and peace. We're exploring the rules of engagement that can encourage a mutually beneficial engagement by religious communities with political leaders and public authorities. That has already been referred to in the discussion. And as Nicola has explained, we're working already on specific projects with the Irish Interchurch Meeting. The Dublin City Interfaith Forum is associated with this work. You will find more about our centre on the website that has just gone live. I'd like to end our conversations this evening by making a few observations about our underlying thinking. And perhaps I could do this by responding to some comments that have appeared in the chat. They're such well thought out comments that it's difficult to take them all on board at a glance. But Sister Helen Alford in Rome, who is a professor at the Angelicum and a member of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences, and has also done a lot to help us shape our projects with the Irish Interchurch Meeting. Sister Helen is asking about whether liberal societies will be comfortable in talking about the goals and meaning of life, and whether this might seem to threaten human freedom. And she says we need to find a way of thinking about what it means to be human that allows us to understand freedom as something that we build together towards a shared common good. Also in the context of the environmental crisis. Now, it seems to me that the term we use vis-a-vis the environmental crisis, it's used by the President of the European Commission in particular, a just transition. That implies action, which is somehow common action. It respects common criteria on the part of a huge variety of actors, businesses, individuals, political authorities, civil society, and so on. So it's all about united action in freedom. And I think the challenge in all politics has been how to bring about this common orientation in freedom towards shared goals. In the old days, it would have been the question of freedom versus authority. So whenever a teacher stands in front of a class, she depends on the goodwill of the students. And how is that achieved? The students have to respond freely in the end, and yet they are responding to something that's real and that needs to be respected. We also have a question from Micheál O'Flaherty. And thank you, Micheál. Micheál has also helped us with our projects with the churches. Micheál is the head of the FRA, the European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency. And Micheál is saying that it would be interesting to hear how religion and society could best engage to build the new normal in the COVID context, short term on vaccine distribution and longer term to make society more resilient. Well, these are the questions that I think we want to develop in dialogue, that in our centre and in our projects, we want to work on questions like this. But again, it comes back to freedom and truth, that somehow in exercising our freedom, we have to respect a reality that we don't ourselves create. And I can certainly testify from my studies in ancient Greek democracy that it was always understood that democracy was the expression of a common hope, of a common society founded very much on friendship, as Archbishop McDowell said in his intervention. Of course, there were great defects in those societies, but the basic idea of a common orientation, a journey that we make together leading to friendship, was fundamental in how people understood politics. That the fact that we are political means that we are shaped in our nature for life in community. Now, there's one other question, or two other questions, or three. I'm not sure I'll be able to reach all of these, Someone, Paul Harron, an old friend, former Secretary General of what was then the Department of Enterprise, mentions the World Economic Conference at Davos and encourages us to organize a major conference at DCU. And I'm sure we look at that. Thank you very much, Paul. And we have a very warm expression of good wishes from the convener of an Irish friendship group in St. Petersburg. And we've had a question from another old friend about historical examples of religion in diplomacy. I'm not sure we have time really, or I have time to grapple with all of the questions that are appearing. So perhaps I'll just try to bring the event to an end with a couple of concluding observations. Our vision is that even as we allow for our different national and regional perspectives in day-to-day negotiations, we can work in the longer term towards a shared civilization at the global level. And second, as speakers have emphasized, we acknowledge that politics is the sphere of reason and reasoned argument. Archbishop John was particularly clear about the fact that we're looking for a voice for religion. We're not looking for the last word. Third, as Kishan pointed out, we must remember the enormous practical contribution made by religious communities with no profit motive. The religious communities have this immense social capital. And finally, I was going to say what I've already said in response to Helen and Micheál and the other questions. There's a basic structural question which has faced politics in every historical era, in every corner of the world, which is whether there is a common life that is more than the sum of our private interests. We need to remain in relationship to one another, even where we disagree. Religions cross frontiers and social divides. A religious perspective can give us a bigger language involving the great fundamental words, some of which the Taoiseach mentioned in his speech. We can find in religion resources to help make politics more effective. As some of the speakers said, we can find the depth to which Archbishop John referred. We can contribute to what Kishan described as the imaginative renewal of the public sphere. So I will end here by referring to Seamus Heaney. I've always thought that the religious imagination, the literary imagination, and the historical imagination converge. Now, Seamus said that crediting poetry is analogous to crediting political possibilities. That could be said to be even the theme of his Nobel speech. So I would say the goal of our centre is to work with others to credit the political possibilities of our time.